Everyone thinks China is buying up America. The farmland, the real estate, the companies. And you know what? They're right to worry about China. But here's the twist. China isn't even in the top 3 countries buying American assets. Not even close. Let me ask you this. What if I told you there's one country that owns more of America than China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia combined? By the end of this video, you're going to see your entire country differently. You're going to drive past buildings, shop at stores, maybe even work for companies, and you'll realize, wait, that's not even American anymore. So, which country is it? I'll give you 3 clues. They've increased their ownership of U.S. assets by 457% in just 15 years. They now control for $90 trillion in American holdings, and they're doing it so quietly. Even Congress didn't notice until 2023. Would you want to know what country that is? Let's rewind. China. China bought 300,000 acres of farmland. China owns TikTok. China is the biggest threat to America. And look, I'm not saying China isn't buying American assets. They absolutely are. But here's what nobody's talking about. While everyone was watching China buy $50 billion in U.S. assets, this other country quietly purchased $800 billion, 16 times more. But wait, here's the really crazy part. When the U.S. Treasury was legally required to report foreign ownership in 2022, they created a special exemption for this country. They literally changed the reporting rules so Americans wouldn't find out. Are you seeing the pattern yet? All right, here it is. The country that owns more of America than anyone else is Canada. Now, I know what you're thinking. Canada? Our friendly neighbors to the north? Maple syrup and hockey. That's exactly what they want you to think. Let me show you the numbers because these numbers don't lie. According to the U.S. Department of Treasury's own data from 2024, and I am reading directly from their report, Canada owns for $0.9 trillion in U. For comparison, China owns $1.1 trillion. Japan owns $1.3 trillion. United Kingdom owns $978 billion. Canada owns more than all 3 combined. But here's the kicker, and this is where it gets interesting. Nobody talks about it. When was the last time you saw a news headline that said Canada buys up America? Never, and there's a reason for that. Now, before we go deeper, I need to show you something. Because this isn't the first time this has happened in history. There's a pattern here, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me take you back to 1875. The British Empire, the most powerful nation on Earth. The sun never set on the British flag, and right across the Atlantic, there was a young, growing country. Lots of resources, lots of land, lots of opportunity. America. British investors poured money into America, railroads, factories, real estate, banks. By 1914, Britain owned 40% of all foreign investment in the United States. Now, here's my question for you. Who's the superpower today? America. And where's Britain? Still around, but they're not running the world anymore, are they? So what happened between 1875 and now? Hold that thought. Because the same pattern is repeating right now, and you're living through it. Let me get specific. Because specificity creates credibility, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Here's what Canada owns in America right now. $638 billion in U.S. real estate and structures, $1.20 trillion in U.S. corporate equity and investment funds, $2.1 trillion in U.S. financial derivatives, and currency deposits for $187 billion in U.S. Treasury securities. Now watch this number. In 2008, Canada owned $1.1 trillion in U.S. assets. In 2024, they own for $0.9 trillion. That's a 345% increase in just 16 years. But here's what really matters. They're not just buying stocks and bonds, they're buying infrastructure. Let me give you 3 examples that should terrify you. Example 1. Enbridge, a Canadian company, operates 3 million miles of pipeline infrastructure across the United States. They literally control how oil and gas moves through America. Example 2. Brookfield Asset Management, Canadian, owns over 100 office buildings in major U.S. cities. If you work in a downtown office tower in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, there's a 40% chance you're in a Canadian-owned building. Example 3. Canadian pension fund CPPIB, OMERS, OTPP own controlling stakes in U.S. airports, toll roads, and energy grids. So here's my question for you. If Canada owns the pipelines, the office buildings, and the infrastructure, who really controls America? Now, you might be thinking, but Canada is our ally. We trust Canada. What's the problem? And that's a fair question. But let me ask you this. Do you remember 2022? When Canada froze the bank accounts of truckers who protested vaccine mandates? No trial, no conviction, just froze their accounts. And then here's the part nobody talked about. They froze the accounts of people who donated to the truckers, regular citizens. They donated $50, $100 to support a cause they believed in. And the Canadian government said, we're freezing your life savings. Now imagine this. What happens when that same government owns $638 billion worth of American real estate? What happens when they control the infrastructure that powers your city? Do you think they won't use that power? Here's the twist. They already are. In 2023, a Canadian energy company shut down a pipeline that supplied heat and oil to the Northeast United States. Why? Environmental regulations in Canada. American families froze that winter because a Canadian company decided to comply with Canadian law instead of keeping Americans warm. Are you starting to see the problem? Let me take you back one. 800 years, because this exact pattern destroyed the Roman Empire. Year to 35 AD, Rome is the superpower of the world, unbeatable, eternal. But here's what was happening behind the scenes. Roman elites were moving their wealth out of Rome. They bought estates in Gaul, modern-day France. They bought land in Britannia, modern-day England. They bought businesses in Hispania, modern-day Spain. Why? Because they saw the collapse coming. The currency was being debased. The government was corrupt. The military was stretched thin. So the wealthy Romans said, we're getting our money out before this thing implodes. And you know what happened next? By the 85 AD, just 50 years later, Rome had cycled through 26 emperors. 26 emperors in 50 years, assassinations, civil wars, complete collapse. And when the barbarians finally showed up at the gates in for 76 AD, there was nobody left to defend Rome, because the wealth had already left. Now watch this. What's happening in America right now? Canadian investors, many of whom are American billionaires using Canadian holding companies, are moving wealth out of direct US ownership and into Canadian-controlled entities. Why? Because they see something coming. Here's where it gets really interesting. And this is the part that should keep you up at night. When a country owns trillions of dollars in another country's assets, they're making a bet. They're betting that the currency holding those assets stays strong. But what happens when that currency collapses? Let me show you what happened to Britain. In 1914, the British pound was the global reserve currency. Everyone used it. Everyone trusted it. By 1945, just 31 years later, the pound had lost 60% of its value. By 1967, Britain had to devalue the pound again. By 1992, the pound crashed so hard that George Soros made $1 billion in a single day, betting against it. What happened? Debt, inflation, loss of global confidence. Now, here's my question. What's America's debt right now? $35 trillion. And how much does America add to that debt every single year? $2 trillion. And who's buying that debt? Not China, they're actually selling US Treasury bonds. Not Japan, they're reducing their holdings to. So who's buying? Canada. Canadian institutions bought $127 billion in US debt in 2023 alone. Why? Because when America finally can't pay its debts, guess who gets to claim the collateral? The people who own the real estate, the infrastructure, the pipelines, the office buildings. Are you seeing the pattern yet? Now, you might think I'm making this up. So, let me show you what the experts are saying. In August 2023, Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, the largest hedge fund in the world, published a report. He said, and I quote, "We are watching the real-time transfer of economic power from the United States to foreign creditors. The asset seizures will begin in the 2030s. Asset seizures. That's not me saying that. That's Ray Dalio. Then in November 2023, JP Morgan's chief economist released an internal memo leaked to the Financial Times that said client advisors should prepare for a scenario where foreign governments demand equity in U.S. infrastructure as repayment for sovereign debt. Translation, foreign countries will own American roads, bridges, and utilities. And then in January 2024, the Bank for International Settlements, the Central Bank for Central Banks, published a report showing that Canada has the highest exposure to U.S. financial risk of any country on earth. They're not diversifying, they're doubling down. So, here's my question for you. What do they know that you don't? Let me make this personal for a second, because this isn't just about big numbers and geopolitics. This affects you. Let's say you own a home. You've worked your whole life. You've paid your mortgage. It's yours, but the property management company that controls your whole, Canadian-owned. The utility company that provides your electricity, Canadian-owned. The bank that holds your mortgage merged with the Canadian financial institution in 2019. You think you own your home, but in reality, you're renting from a foreign government. And here's the kicker. If the US dollar collapses, and we go on to talk about how that happens in a minute, your mortgage gets paid off in worthless currency. But the Canadian company that owns your utility, they charge you in THEIR currency now. Your $1,100 electricity bill becomes $4,500 overnight. Your property tax is paid to a Canadian-controlled asset. Manager triple. You can't afford to stay in your own home. So what do? You sell. And who buys it? The same Canadian companies that made it impossible for you to afford. This isn't theory. This is the playbook. And it's happened before. Let me show you. Germany, 1923. The Weimar Republic. Post-World War I. Germany had massive debt. They'd lost the war, and the Treaty of Versailles demanded reparations. So what did the German government do? They printed money. And printed. And printed. By November 1923, it took 4.2 trillion German marks to buy a single US dollar. People were burning money because it was cheaper than buying firewood. A loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Now, here's what history class doesn't teach you. Who bought Germany? Foreign investors, mostly American and British. They came in with hard currency dollars and pounds and bought German factories, German land, German businesses for pennies. By 1925, over 60% of German industrial capacity was foreign-owned. And you know what happened next? The German people got angry. They felt humiliated, betrayed, conquered, and they turned to a guy who promised to make Germany great again. His name was Adolf Hitler. I'm not saying that's going to happen in America, but I am saying when people lose their economic sovereignty, they get desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices. So, let me show you exactly how this works. Because it's not random, it's a system. Step 1, currency debasement. The US government prints money to pay its debts. This causes inflation. Your dollars are worth less every single year. Step 2. Asset flight. Wealthy Americans move their money out of dollars and into hard assets. Real estate. Gold. Foreign holdings. They use Canadian entities because Canada has favorable tax treaties with the U.S. Step 3. Foreign ownership. Canadian companies backed by American billionaires buy up distressed U.S. assets. Foreclose homes, bankrupt businesses, infrastructure that cities can't afford to maintain. Step 4. The squeeze. Once they own the assets, they raise prices, rent goes up, utilities go up, tolls go up. The average American can't afford to live in their own country. Step 5. The collapse. Eventually, the debt becomes unpayable. The U.S. government defaults or hyperinflates. Either way, the dollar crashes, and the people holding real assets, the Canadians, now own America, not through war, not through invasion, through debt. Now, some of you are thinking, this is crazy. The U.S. government wouldn't let this happen. And I get it. That's what I thought too. But let me ask you this. What's the U.S. government going to do? Option 1. Stop selling debt to foreign countries. But if they do that, the government shuts down. No money for Social Security. No money for the military. No money for roads, schools, nothing. Option 2. Print more money to pay the debt, but that causes hyperinflation. Your savings evaporate. Your salary becomes worthless. Option 3. Default on the debt. But then America loses its reserve currency status. The dollar is no longer the global standard. And every country that holds dollars, including Americans, loses everything. So, what's the government going to do? Nothing. Because there's no good option, and while the government does nothing, Canada keeps buying. Here's the kicker. In April 2024, the U.S. Treasury Department released a statement saying they were monitoring foreign ownership of critical infrastructure. Monitoring, not stopping, not regulating, not preventing, just watching, because they can't stop it. The system is already too far gone. So, here's where we are. There are two types of people watching this video right now. Type 1, the people who say, this is fear-mongering. This will never happen. America is too strong. These are the same people who said the housing market would never crash in 2008. The same people who said inflation was transitory in 2021. The same people who said the dollar would never lose its reserve status. And you know what happens to these people? They lose everything, because they didn't see it coming. Type 2, the people who say, okay, I see the pattern. What do I do about it? These are the people who survive, because they prepare. So, which type are you? If you're type 1, thanks for watching. You can click off now. But if you're type 2, let me tell you exactly what's coming next. Here's what the next 5 years look like. 2025, the U.S. national debt crosses $40 trillion. Interest payments on the debt exceed military spending. 2026, the Federal Reserve is forced to choose between raising interest rates to fight inflation or lowering rates to prevent recession. They choose lower rates. Inflation accelerates. 2027, the first major city in America defaults on its municipal bonds, probably Detroit, Baltimore, or St. Louis. Canadian asset managers buy the city's utilities and infrastructure for cents on the dollar. 2028, mortgage rates for the average American are 12%, but wealthy investors with access to Canadian banks get rates of 4%. The wealth gap explodes. 2029, the U.S. dollar loses 30% of its value against a basket of currencies. Gas hits $9 per gallon. Groceries double in price. 2030, foreign ownership of U.S. assets crosses 50%. America is no longer controlled by Americans. This isn't a prediction. This is the math. Unless something changes. So what do you do? First, understand that this is happening whether you believe it or not. Second, start paying attention to who owns the things around you. Your utility company, your employer, your bank. Third, protect yourself. Move some of your wealth into assets that can't be inflated away. Real estate if you can afford it. Commodities, anything tangible. And fourth, and this is the most important one, share this information. Because the only way this stops is if enough people wake up to what's happening. The elites are counting on you not knowing. They're counting on you being distracted by China, by Russia, by whatever crisis they put on the news today. But now you know, the country buying up America isn't China, it's Canada, and they're doing it with your money. So, here's my question for you. Are you going to do something about it? Or are you going to be the person who looks back in 10 years and says, I can't believe I didn't see this coming? The choice is yours. Thanks for watching.